as promised, I'm making a little tutorial to show you how to deal with the problem with importing some of your PSDs into After Effects. So, for example, this is an animation that Daniel made. So this is what it looks like in Photoshop. So it looks fine. It works, frames aren't wobbly. But when I import into After Effects, I'm going to go through just importing into After Effects. So right-click, import file. And I'm going to go track down that PSD file. It's this one. Click import, and then I want it as composition or composition 10 layer sizes, one of those two. I'm going to go with composition. Click OK, and that'll create a composition. I'm double clicking, and I've shown this before, but maybe it's worth going over this again. So now I have all my layers in After Effects, but I want them to be playing in order, so I want them sequenced. So I don't need to do anything with my background. My background can be locked. And then from there, I'm going to select my first frame, hold down Shift, select my last frame. And let's just shrink the size. Maybe about 2 frames per frame should be fine. And then selecting in the order of first and then last is now going to come into play. So right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layers. Now whichever layer I selected first is going to be first in the sequence, and whichever layer I selected last is then going to be last in the sequence. And there we go. So obviously they're invisible now, so I just need to make sure the layers are all visible. Cool. Right, okay, cool. Now I've got this going. Okay, let's watch this in After Effects, and you can see that it moves around a lot. It probably has something to do with the amount of space this guy occupies, and obviously his dimensions change quite a lot. So that's probably what's causing the massive shift there. So the workaround is to actually export every single frame as an image. So I'll go to frame 1, export that as an image, then frame 2. So I just went export, quick export, but you could also use the Save for Web option. So it's not layer for layer, it's frame for frame. A lot of you have multiple layers that are grouped together into sort of a grouping structure. So you will go literally frame for frame as it would be here on your timeline, rather than based on your layer. I hope that's clear. So I've technically already done this. I made a folder here called Death Frames for his little boy death animation. And I did the first, I guess, 8 or 9. Let's just do number 9 again. It looks like it's funky. So this one, I'm going to turn the background off. File, export, quick export. Okay, so I should have about 9 frames already. Obviously, I haven't done all of them, but this should hopefully give you the gist. So in After Effects, what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to create a new folder just to organize my files, and I'll call this the same thing, Death Frames, or whatever the name of your animation is. This is purely just to remain organized. And in there, I can go in by double clicking. I can go File, Import, or right click, Import File. Find this Death Frames folder, select the first one. Now, the most important thing here is to make sure you select sequence. You might end up with either PNG sequence or JPEG sequence here at the bottom, but make sure this option is checked. It has to be a sequence. Even though I've only selected 1 frame, if the sequence option is selected, it's going to treat this kind of like a video clip, where all these frames form part of a sequence, a video sequence, so to speak. And then you can click Import. And what you end up with is something like this. I'm going to create a new composition. So the easiest way to create a new composition is literally to just drag what you've just imported onto this composition icon, and then create a composition that matches in terms of file size and frame rate, or resolution and frame rate. And this is what I end up with. So now it's got all those images, but bound together in this kind of sequence. And it's not wobbling anymore. So it's literally exporting each frame individually as an image and importing it back into After Effects. So the other option is if you don't want to use the image sequence option, you can literally import those frames into this folder that you've created. Let's go into it, go import, file, and instead of going sequence, I can import them one by one. So this is kind of how you've been doing most of your things in a sense. So I just have to make sure that the sequence option is unchecked, and with all of my images selected, import them. And now I've got a list of images. So now let's do the same thing. I'm going to make a new composition that matches in terms of resolution and frame rate. Obviously it's only one frame, so that won't really apply. But now there's only one image in this composition, and I can add the rest of the images on top. Just gonna make sure these are in order. So it's going from 1 to 9. So this should look familiar because this is how you've been doing all of your sprite sheets. So I select the first image, then the last image, holding down Shift, and I do the same thing. I'm gonna just shorten the length so it's 2 frames, or however long you think the duration should be. And then keyframe assistance, sequence layers. And this should look familiar. But it's maintaining its resolution because we kind of force the resolution by exporting it frame for frame from Photoshop. We told it exactly how big each image should be. Okay, I hope that helps.